This program is brought to you by Dielectric LLC, Energy in Motion.
Carlos Nelson with What's Up Worldwide, and we're debuting our first content on Worldwide. We've been using other people's content, Voice of America and so forth, but today is our inaugural run with some special guests from Kenya, from the United States, and we're going to talk about a couple of issues. Mr. Khan, can you introduce yourself and tell our audience where you're from and what you do?
What's up, Kansas City? I am originally from Kenya, but I live in Kansas City, so that's why I gotta give a big shout out to What's Up Kansas City. I am a CEO for two companies, Indigenous to Indigenous and Baraza Cultural Center. That's
all
what
right.
I do.
Hey, Kurt, run it down. You know the program.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. A gift shout to Dallas, Texas. We call it the Big D. My name is David Kirk Njenga, and I hail from Kenya, the great country of Kenya. I'm a registered financial consultant. I run an insurance agency down here in Dallas, but I've also been involved in other business, export business from here in the US to Kenya.
Excellent. Hey, James, you know the protocol.
Come on now. My name is James. First thing I do is I pastor, have a church here in Kenya. So we do a lot of community work. I'm a coach. I'm an author. I mentor so many young people. And also, as you can see, I run something called School of Wisdom, where we mentor so many young people who are in transition, like from university, going to their jobs, preparing them, and in business, entrepreneurship. We do a lot of that. On top of that, I'm a business person, in interest in agriculture, and right now we are doing, alongside with my wife, in projects in healthcare, and I'm also doing some projects in water treatment. So that's what I'm doing right now.
Excellent. And tell our audience where you're located at right now.
I'm located in Nairobi, Kenya. Nairobi, right in the heart of the city of Kenya, capital city of Kenya, Nairobi.
Excellent. Hey, Kurt, I'm going to let you lead the discussion on what you see as you've been over here in the States, you're native of Kenya, and how do you see the diaspora here connecting with the continent?
Well, thank you, Mr. Carlos, for the opportunity. And first of all, it's great to get to meet you. And I thank also Mr. Khan for introducing us to this great platform. I always say that I keep my eyes open, and as it's always say that your network is your net worth. So the more you keep on to network, the more your net worth just begins to grow. And it's really interesting just having this kind of a conversation about the diaspora, or rather the continent, and having somebody like you, Mr. Carlos, believing that you've been raised here, born here, and always I say that I usually get to learn from people that are from this area or this land, because I'm a student every day. I'm a student of of events, of things that are changing, because the world is changing. And for now, what I can look at is some of the, because sometimes it's good to be relevant. And at this moment, you find that people are dealing with the COVID effect. And this is something that we have never experienced before. And there's so many people who have been hit so hard. and especially in terms of their job, in terms of their businesses. And it has been an issue because I didn't mention that I'm an associate pastor, and you find that there are a lot of our members who happen also to lose their jobs, to lose their businesses, and right now they're definitely going through a difficult moment. And I want to believe that sometimes it is good to have a discussion of the shift, because this is a situation whereby nobody was actually prepared that this thing is going to stay for this long. Because I remember in March, I was in Kenya, and we were looking at what was happening in China. And we thought that this is a China disease, is a China flu.
Yeah.
To realize it's a pandemic that is going to affect the entire world. So in our conversation, probably we can just look at the reflection, because it has not only affected the Americans, it has affected the Kenyans, the Africans, the Asians. It has affected everybody else. And in such a time as this, it's important to hit the reset button just to have an understanding that, hey, if it is my business, how do I set up a structure so that whenever such a thing like this can happen, what are the lessons that I'm going to learn, so that after COVID, post-COVID, what is my preparation for the next crisis that might come and might affect myself, might affect my family, might affect the community? Because I know Mr. Khan and Mr. James can attest that the people who are in diaspora most of the time, you find we are the people who are helping people, our people in Kenya. Sometimes the people who are in Kenya, or rather in Africa, they think that we are very loaded, because we are in the US, and every time they get to call on you, they just expect that you are going to send money back, just back home. But thank God that God has been gracious that in diaspora, people have explored different careers, different businesses, that we've been able to be sustained in a way that we are also able to impact lives back in Kenya. Because when you look at the statistic that shows about the remittance of amount of revenue that the diasporians, especially the North America, they send in Kenya, is a big chunk. Actually, they usually equate it with a kind of loans that even the nation gets from like countries like China. So at this moment, actually, the government actually recognizes diaspora as a force to reckon with, because of the remittance, because of the remittance that we do that. But at the time you look at it, okay, probably the money that we send, it's just helping here in a smaller spectrum. But what if this money was just cohesively, collectively doing projects, so that it can be more impactful? And it just goes back to the educational or economic aspect, whereby we just have to learn, okay, if we are able to remit this kind of money to a nation like Kenya, how much more can we be able to come together and pull our resources together? Resources might not be money. It might be ideas. I always like, whenever I talk to Mr. Khan, or I talk to my brother James, and every time that we talk about ideas, and those ideas, they're the ideas that are going to be implemented, and we're going to see actually a change in a country like Kenya, or rather even extensively looking at Africa. So probably what we can I can say is that to look at some of the lessons that we have learned during this period of time, and the structures that we can be able to put in our entrepreneurial journey, or as individuals, that you can put together, so that the next crisis probably we won't be far off, bad or worse than the way things might be. And also some of the tools that we can be able to utilize, and also positioning ourselves. Like now, I'm really impressed. They've been like a black kind of entrepreneurs and restaurants owners that are coming together, and they have like a group. And it was just amazing just to see that people are lining up to go buy to those mom and pops businesses, which is going now to create a revenue and resources and make them grow, versus just the other time that we've been going to buy McDonald's, buy Wendy's. It is okay to buy those places, but we have to come to a place whereby we are coming together and promoting our own. The Jews, they don't do it apologetically. They buy Jews.
This is what I want to ask you, or anyone on the panel. What country colonized Kenya?
England, British.
England? Because as I'm becoming more enlightened, that a lot of the national debt is going to these countries that have colonized different parts of Africa, that they're paying huge sums of money to these countries that is really damaging. You also, Kurt, mentioned China. From my perspective, and what I know, I'm not on the continent, but China seems to have really put major investments into Africa, all parts. I don't know exactly what they're doing in Kenya exactly, but it's a lot of backlash on that, and how they've treated Africans in China. And I would like to know what's your feelings on that. And James, you're right there. How do you see that? Because I think what's important that Kurt has, the first topic is really economics. And economics makes the world go round. And when I look at the continent, how they portray the continent here is that the continent is poor and this and that, but all the natural resources that the West has made the West are coming from the continent, and they're giving the continent some paper money while they're taking the precious metals, they're taking the raw resources. And I'm really wondering, how does the government deal with that? And they talk about corruption, but from my perspective, United States has just as much or more corruption on this planet. It's just not seen. It's dealt in a very sophisticated way. And so I'd like to hear what your take is on that. Your sound is off, James.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carlos.
I'm Mr. Nelson to y'all.
Oh, Mr. Nelson.
Yeah, because Carlos is my first name.
You know, in Africa we don't have first or last name, but that's okay.
You don't?
Mr. Nelson.
Hold it. Educate me, brother. Educate me. All right.
Every time they ask us at the airport, what's your last name? And you're like, huh? You know?
All right. Get me together so I can, when I roll over there, I won't be in the dark. And that's the problem we have, that we come from the continent and don't even understand what things are about over there. Don't understand how things are done there. And Kurt, I really like what you said about when you're doing that remittance. The people have a misconception of the West. They think the streets are paved with gold, and because you come over here, you automatically have made it. And we'll get into that conversation. Mm-hmm. Go ahead, James.
Thank you very much for introducing and hosting us tonight. I've been to the US, I think maybe like 15 times now. And and also my brothers who are there, Mr. Khan and Mr. Kak. I mean, they've been both sides. I've also been both sides, and it is wonderful. I commend them for what they are doing, because most people who live here going to America, they are going to the American dream. And then at the end of the day, you realize there was no dream at all. but the big thing is, as I've traveled to America, the more I've seen the importance for us to build Africa. And I remember one day we had some tribal crashes. That was the year like 2005, no, 1995, and we went to give people food somewhere in the Rift Valley. And I looked at the people we were giving food. The land is very productive. The place, you know, good soil, good climate, best of climate. And that day I got a vision. I said, you know what? I want to be a part of making a difference, bringing a difference to this, my own people. And I have a vision because, as you say, the West colonized us. I remember one time I did a teaching. I did a series of teaching, and I was asking, the question was, what is wrong with being black, you know? And, you know, and what's wrong with being black is not just the color, it's systems that were put and structures that we were put under, and also we also inherited mentalities that cause us to be always like the underdog, or always complaining instead of taking the initiative. So when I look at my brothers here who are taking initiative and being ready to make a difference, it's very encouraging. You said Africa has the greatest resources. That's true. This is the richest continent on earth. And yet people are very poor. People are begging. People are living hand to mouth. And we need to come, as we are coming together like this, to build policies and build structures that are going to help good governance, you know, integrity, things like integrity, because African man, we eat one another, you know. That's what we do. You know, when you go to other people, they build one another. But the African people, we are, most of the times, we are our own undoing. So when we come together like this for one purpose and to work with integrity, it's a great thing. You asked about the Chinese. I can tell you we don't want Chinese here at all, at all. They are the worst people to work with. They are the worst colonialists you've ever seen on earth. They come into a market like in Nairobi right now. I'll tell you, we had a conversation where they would take a whole housing block and they would live like 400 Chinese in that place. They would get, you know, workers, cooks, chefs from China. They don't trust anybody. Anybody cleaning from anything that is done, they are getting it from China. So they take all the money. When they come here to work, they're cutting the trees that are endangered species, and they are taking them to China. They are killing our elephants, taking ivory to China. Our wildlife is being smuggled. And on top of that, you find a Chinese person selling maize on the streets. I mean, they are selling, you know, like roasting maize on the street.
What he means, what he means is corn on the cob.
Oh, right. I'm familiar.
Okay.
You understand? I mean, they come and they start hawking things in the streets, and you know, all these kind of things. On top of that, prostitution on the streets. People have come from China to Africa, and they have come now on prostitution on the street. So the good thing with Americans, and that's why we like also working with people from especially America, is Americans, when they come here, they, number one, they want to hire workers from here. They are well paid. They have good policies. They have good work and salary kind of protections, insurance, and all those kind of policies that are very good for the people who are down here. And whatever they build, most of the time, it's left here. So when you talk about Chinese, I think that's one of the worst mistakes.
Tell me this. Let me cut you off for a minute.
Yeah, go ahead.
From my point of view, it's like, who invited them? And from my point of view, I don't know what the political system is there as it relates to voting and what have you. The leadership has had to invite them there, and what does is the leadership a representation of the general population?
No.
So let me intervene there a little bit. That's a very nice question that you've put. So this is how the system worked. In the beginning, what you see is what you get, is what we believed. So China came in, and at this moment, not to come to defend of China, any country would do whatever is best for their people. Okay? So they saw an opportunity in Africa. They saw an opportunity in Africa. There are lots of low-hanging fruits. And they realized that we are not organized, and they realized that we needed financing. And so what they did in the way they came to Kenya was they said, we are going to help you build the railway. And there was this huge project to build the railway line through the East African countries, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and now it's going to Rwanda. So what the Chinese did was they gave us a loan which was very, very unresistible. It was a huge loan they gave us at a very good cost. In return, not only did they give us the loan, but they got the contract to build the railway. Within the clause of the contract, they said we were going to bring our own workers. So the problem was whoever was making the deal for us didn't read the fine line. So
how can a government not read the fine lines? And I can see me not reading the fine lines, but a government official.
Yes. So this is where I'm trying to
smell.
This is where I'm trying to be a little bit diplomatic about this, because I still have interest in investing back in my motherland.
I do too, but not with those type contracts.
Yes. So I just want to show you the bigger picture here is now the problem that is happening now. And when the, Brother James says that he's seeing a man on the street corner, a Chinese man on the street corner selling corn on the cob. Number one, what has taken him to that level that he does not have enough money that he's selling corn on the cob? So this is where the Chinese government made a deal with our government and brought 50,000 prisoners. Free labor. The problem that we, as the diasporas, we didn't find out about this deal until it was already in place. Number one, the laborers from China, are they serial killers? Are they pedophiles? We don't know. But the Chinese made a deal with them that if you are serving 25 to life, you come to Africa, give us 10 to 15 years of your work, we are going to set you free with one condition: don't show your face back in China ever again. And then the locals that are left from the Chinese that are left there, what they do is they marry our sisters. Once you marry an African woman, automatically you get your citizenship. As soon as they get their papers, there is a divorce, the guy leaves. So there is a huge problem. Going back to my brother Kirk, he did not mention the amount of money we are sending as a collective. Always Africa is pictured as we are poor. The infomercials, they show kids with flies on the faces. We need money. As a collective, we are sending over 500 billion, $500 billion every year to Africa. But the money that we are sending are to our family members, uncle, aunts. We're not, so we are running the economy of Africa. And that's why the government is so reluctant to fix, because they know, you know what? You have your family members, and this is where we are finding like the COVID-19 now has exposed the weaknesses that we have, because every 15th of the month, Kirk was sending his family $500. And all of a sudden, there is no income. The expectations of people at home, they can't understand why all of a sudden can't you even send me $50? Not knowing that we have lost our jobs, we have been laid off. So there is a huge problem here.
Well, let me interrupt you. I guess I'm on the outside because Mugabe is my man. Africans for Africans, and all you Europeans, for the most part, that I would be nationalizing everything, and I wouldn't care. Bring your army if that's what you think you need to do, but you can't continue to rape the continent, because there's only a few ways to solve this problem, in my estimation, and I'm not a politician or a businessman over there, but I can't even imagine that that's really institutional slavery that your future generations have nothing to look for.
Thank you. Well said. And this is the modern day slavery we are looking at, because China is giving us huge loans, knowing very well that we cannot pay them back. So once they give us these loans and all of a sudden it's time to pay them back, we say, you know what? We can't pay you this loan, but we are willing to give you the port where
and that's where all the money is being made.
Yes, sir.
Quite a bit. And what I'm not understanding from how you explain that, how you take the loan and then hire them. If it's a true loan, you put that out for bid to other countries.
Yes, I want to defend Africa for a minute here, because I think I can ask you a question here, Carlos. Mr. Nelson, sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. We don't have no first names.
No
last
problem.
name. Did you hear that, Khan?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes,
I heard it clear.
So my question here to you is, how old is America?
200 years, 200 and change.
And Africa, Kenya, to be precise, we are 56 years old. We inherited a system set by the people that were exiting, making sure that that system was there for them. There are things that I am livid when I go to Kenya and I pass by a courthouse and I see those judges wearing those
and all of that. I get it.
Yes. Now the question is, we are looking for a change. We are looking for a solution rather than pointing fingers. How do we? So there is
leadership. What did I say about Mugabe? They try to vilify him, but he's more like, hey, this is my country, get out. And yes. I don't know whether it was you, Kurt, or you, James, Israel, unapologetic. Hey, this is us.
I say that. Yes.
This is us. And anybody that don't like it, tough.
Yeah.
And I think the mentality that has been indoctrinated in blacks that are not in Africa and Africa in general has been well thought out on dividing us, on our thoughts, and on where we're at. To me, is really simple. And if it's not that simple, if we're sending billions over to the continent, as in saying for 6 months, we're going to put all of that money that we've been sending in a pot, and we're going to produce some factories. We're going to build some things that our relatives can work in right there on the continent.
Just to interject with what you're saying here, so let's just for once look at Black Lives Matter, okay? That's a huge thing. And just for somebody to acknowledge, just to say the word Black Lives Matter, people here want to say all lives matter. I understand that. So I want to take it back just a notch. In Africa, we have tribalism. And that is where we are failing ourselves, where you put a minority of people in power and they make all the rules for the majority of the people. So this is a system until we understand. If we look at Rwanda, what happened there, the genocide that took place there, one would think that the other African countries would wake up. If you
South
look
Africa.
at,
Awesome.
yes, if you look at South Africa, if you look at when our brothers from Zimbabwe went to another African country to look for jobs, where they were killed and they were put on fire just because they were from a different African country.
Right.
So the tribalism, again, this was a system set by the people that exited. So this is right now, I'm a mix. I am half Indian, I'm a half African. My brother's here. So we are the new generation. From the time that I was growing up, a racial couple like an Indian and an African was unseen. You could not see that. But I went back a few years ago and I went out and I could see this beautiful thing that a Black man and an Indian woman holding hands, and I could see their children. I can see the change happening, but at the same time, there is new money and there's old money. We gotta recognize that. I think, Kirk, you want to maybe add something to what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There are religion divides us a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Churches divide us a lot here. So this here is a very good beginning of a dialogue. Mm-hmm. And I'm so thankful that we are going to be on a world platform that people can see. There is a lot of animosity here between the Black Americans and the Africans, the unspoken animosity, because they believe we are favored. You know, I used to be a social worker, and the first time that I heard that I was the other Black, I was really surprised. What do you mean I was the other Black? They're like, oh yeah, you're the good kind of Black. You just come to a country for a few and then you're going to go back. But so there's a whole system here that I think I've just opened a box of Pandora here. Mm-hmm. You know, back to you guys. Sorry.
Education is the key, and that's what I'd be wondering. What are they teaching? See, out of the mouth of babes, if the intelligentsia recognize that you have tribalism, you have religion, and you have maybe one or two other things. It seems like from kindergarten on up, the new generation, they're saying there's only one Africa. There's only one people, and all of these things are vestiges of colonialism. And we're looking for you as the next generation to lead, to make the changes that are necessary. Because you can't keep, to me, you can't teach old dogs new tricks.
That's right.
Go ahead, Kurt.
Well, actually, just going back to what you're talking about, the highlight about Africa, understanding Africa will definitely be built by the Africans, because we understand the issues that goes through in Africa. Because sometimes I usually see even sometimes some missionaries coming to Africa, but they don't understand what the natives are going through. And if it is in terms of building, I get Mr. Nelson, I teach him what we go through as Africans, you see, because when we sit down, there's some of the elements that you get to learn. I've had some of my friends, African Americans who have visited Kenya. And when they come with a very total different perspective about Africa. And they fall in love with Africa, not the pictures that they have seen. So it is upon us just to decide that what do we want to build, despite of the tribes and every division that we have. One of the books that there's a time I was studying about the rise of United Arab Emirates, and this is a book by Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, My Vision. And it talks about how they build Dubai. Everybody now wants to go to Dubai. They have built magnificent stuff, and they decided that despite of them being, in a place whereby this place looks to be like a desert, but they desired that despite of the way the place looks, let us get the Emiratis and have a vision. It took a leader who had a vision for the country, despite of all kind of division. And he painted the picture to them and the areas that they want to improve on. So sometimes the excuses that we have about Africa, the colonization and everything else, we look at countries like Singapore that were third world countries, but there were leaders who decided, hey, we can move from the back to the front, forget about the tribalism.
I still think because Kwame Nkrumah, he had it right, and he said, I think this was in '68, one of the conventions he had with all that. He said once they split Africa up, and the governors and all the different people, the 21 gun salutes and all of that, they were going to get used to that, and they were not going to want to unite as one Africa, one currency. As I tell African Americans, our middle classes, the ones that's really could help us, but when you had to go to work for these corporations, you had to be able to assimilate to fit in. But it's a difference between assimilating and then taking on their values. And their values was nothing but the dollar. And so if the dollar is the value, that means everything else takes second place. And so therefore, you're not going to be pushing forward on issues you need to be pushing forward on, because you're only concerned about yourself and your family. And once you're divided like that, it's very, very hard to work as a group.
No, I like the point Kirk was making, and I like the point that you have taken. And now this is where the invisible forces take out leaders like Gaddafi. Okay, so we are talking about America leaving a footprint. This is where Africa does not need the world. If there is a wall to be built around, we should build a wall around Africa and not let anybody in. Gaddafi, Saddam Hussein, even though they were dictators, according to our quote-on regimes here. Our current situation, this is the worst.
But I understand what you're saying. Gaddafi was saying, hey, let's get back on the gold standard. You know,
Yes.
if all this paper stuff, we don't need that. We got gold. Now,
Yes.
if you don't have no gold, then we become more important, more relevant. And when you don't really understand, and that's why my earlier statement, you have to really start with the youth. It's a long process in my estimation in freeing Africa.
And just to jump there, because you just said we have to start with the youth. The unemployment of the youth in Africa is crazy. If you look at the numbers, it's crazy. So the educational system is very broken. We have visions 2015, they've gone to 2020, they've gone to 2030, they're going to 2080. These are visions by the African leaders that we have. They're all in good intent, but none of them have been carried through. They look very good on piece of paper. So now somebody like Kirk here, what he, and I'm very proud to have met him, what he is doing in America here, he wants to replicate it in Africa. It's the only way that we can start. It's show and tell. Say, hey guys, we can do this, but we need to do it together. You know, knowledge is power. The transfer of knowledge is where most of the times we feel like we get cut out. The American footprint in Africa is the military. That's it. The investors are very scared. And this is where, again, I hold myself responsible. What am I doing to make a difference today? You know, but having met you, and I think you being kind enough to give us a platform here, I would love to see, because I know as soon as this thing will air, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of comments that disagree and agree with what we are doing. But hey, it is what it is at the end of the day.
What I would say, because I want to really close out, and I said earlier, I think we need to do something like this maybe twice a week and have different different perspectives, different people coming on, and further the discussion. And my main thing, I'm with Kurt. How do we deal with some of the financial issues that we need to deal with to come together, bring some coalitions? How do we bring some Black businessmen here in the States to come together to do some things in Kenya that that investment will yield the type of profits that they're looking for?
Before you go there, sorry, I think James has an intensive knowledge on the question that you have asked. I would let Kirk answer that. James here, on the other hand, is doing some amazing $100 million projects that are happening from here in Kenya. Kirk, right, please. Back to you, Kirk.
Okay. Well, I can say just talking on what Mr. Nelson has mentioned, how we can be able to form coalitions. And sometimes you look at us identifying what are some of the issues or the areas that we can be able to come in and create solution. Let's look at something like food security. Lately, I've been really doing a study on things like agriculture. I came to realize Africa will be feeding the world because the landmass favors Africa. When it comes to the weather, really favors Africa. So it just takes people to identify. Let me say, like most of the farmers in Africa, they've been subsistence, kind of farmers. I'm just farming so that I can be able to feed my family and just feed my neighbors. But now the mindset has to shift from just being a subsistence to a business, because now if I approach Mr. Nelson, I'm telling him that I have 1,000 acre whereby we can plant onions. How much can you be able to chip in or bring in so that we can be able to take these onions probably to Europe or back to America, and then we're going to increase our revenue. And guess what? We are going to create jobs. As Mr. Khan has mentioned about the number of youths who do not have jobs. These people, they are hardworking. They've been to college, they've been to universities. Some of them, they have ideas, but they do not have the resources. They don't in resources in terms of money. And that's when now comes up to education and laying down structures of identifying some of the solution, so that when we are rallying a coalition, we can say that we have a solution here. So what can we be able to do so that we can tackle this issue? So that when we are bringing people into the coalition, already we have painted the picture, the canvas picture of what is our intention. So it becomes easy for somebody to buy in, knowing what they're getting themselves into and creating a solution. If it is in particular sector, you're definitely looking at the results of what you're looking into.
Very well said. Very well
James.
said.
Thank you very much. When I look at Africa, I believe the most important thing is empowerment and mentorship. We now have a lot of universities, and we have many young people who are coming out of universities. But most of them, you'll find some of them even have masters, and I met one guy, I think he had a graduate, and hawking on the street, trying to sell maybe like towels. And I just started to interrogate him, and he tells you his story. So there's a lot of universities right now, like in Kenya, and people have papers, they have documentations, and all that kind of thing. But I think the most important thing right now, we need to bridge the gap for mentorship. And I remember the book by Bob Kiyosaki. He's talking about Rich Dad, Poor Dad. You can have a finance, degree and know nothing about money, because you need to be out there and be an apprentice, see somebody who is doing it for you to be trained on how it is being done. So, and it's not enough even for us just to take our students outside the country to go and just, have a good ceremony, graduation ceremony, and come back home. But the thing we need to do a lot is to have people in the heart of things where it's happening, like if it's in agriculture. Let's have like people who move into agriculture. We bring people here, we bring people, and let people do it. One of the biggest mistakes we did, especially in our country here, is we killed the polytechnics with the universities. Because now the polytechnics gives you the skill. You are doing work with your hands. And right now, people leaving university, they can't even get a job because they don't have any experience. They don't have any qualification. Somebody coming from a polytechnic, they already have a skill. So we need to build and develop skill on the young people. But right now, we're doing a couple of projects right here. Like there's a huge project coming up on kind of a level 7 hospital that is coming up. Instead of having most of our people who, when they get sick right now, they are moving to India. India now, like hospital, medicine, tourism, it's already there. It's big time. People in India now, people go there for tourism, but for health. So why don't we build, like establish like level 7 hospital here, and build apartments, build accommodations, bring state-of-the-art doctors, such that instead of somebody paying a ticket, paying hotel to go there, why don't it be done here and you are at home? You have the home advantage. There are many opportunities in agriculture. Some of the stuff we are doing in this country is right now something we call value addition. In Africa, and you mentioned Zimbabwe and Mugabe, the biggest problem
That's
is—
my man.
Yeah, and the biggest problem is we chase now the people who have like 1,000 acres, they have experience, they have the machinery, and you allow people to move in there who never had experience ever in farming. And what happens? The whole farm that you chase the people who are there, it becomes a bush. And the same man who occupies the land, who is saying, let the white man go away, he can only farm a quarter of an acre. Are you getting what I mean? Because,
yes.
because we don't have the training. And that's what happened in Zimbabwe. So as much as we are actually even getting the young black person to take over, we have to put them like apprentice. They have to know what it's being done. Because we can't just do an immediate, like a shakeover. We leave a vacuum. Yeah, are you getting what I'm saying?
I understand that.
Okay,
but
let me finish on that point. And that's why I'm saying, like in agriculture right here in Kenya and in other countries, what we need is value addition. Value addition in agriculture. You find like in a whole area, everybody is planting maize. So the prices, when all maize is in the market, the prices just plummet. So, I mean, the farmer gets nothing. Then another people are just planting tomatoes and the market floods and they have to throw them away. What if we came in and processed the tomatoes, dried them, or made tomato sauces or other things that are done with tomatoes? So if we can come and empower farmers here in value addition, it will go a long, long way. We can even store their produce for even a year and release it or space the growing, with agri-tech, So some of the points I'll bring across.
I think that is a very good point, because one of the most important thing is accessibility.
Yes.
Access. We don't have the access, So that is, Mr. Nelson, that is the point that we need to hit home is.
Well, let me say this. We're not going to solve all of that in this one series, but what I'm looking forward to is getting with Kurt and getting with James to, he was talking about the hospital, and Kurt really had a good outlook on this land situation, and see how we can bring some other people on that have some expertise.
Yes.
With the hospitalization, and seeing whether we can put some people together that can raise some money and get some matching funds that can start to work on some of these issues. It's like a big bucket, and this might only be a drop in the bucket, but the road to success is always under construction. And I think that this is a good point. And now that you know about What's Up Worldwide, we're the only Black-owned digital media in the Midwest, and we have many more platforms, because I'm going to be looking to bring some athletes on, because we have the largest, one of the largest sports sites also, CascadeSports.tv. And everything that we really do with our media company is about empowering our Blackness and people that look like you and myself. So on ending this,
Before you end, I'm sorry, I'm going to be a
Mr.
little
Khan.
bit rude. I like the bucket that you're going to bring. Let's make sure there are no holes in the bucket, because we can be pouring as much water as we want. And if there's a big hole in the bottom, let's make sure we bring a brand new bucket that has no
that's
holes.
hold it. That's going to be decided off camera. Once we close out, we'll have a little discussion on some of the next steps. But as I say to our audience, when you invest in your community, you're really just investing in yourself. Good night.
The program is brought to you by the Kansas City Business Association.